In January 2026, 1,000 software engineers answered one question. What AI tool do you actually use every day? 8 months earlier, Claude Code didn't exist. By January, it was number one, ahead of GitHub Copilot, ahead of Cursor, ahead of every tool that had years of head start. 95% of those engineers now use AI tools at least weekly. 75% use AI for half or more of their work. The question stopped being whether to use these tools. It became, which ones, and how much are you willing to pay? Last month, Google answered that question differently than anyone expected. They shipped a free alternative, open source, no credit card. 1,000 requests per day, just for having a Google account. This video is about what that actually means for your workflow and your wallet. Let's talk about the economics first, because they're stranger than they look. Claude Code has 3 tiers. $20 a month is the entry point, but heavy users hit the limit within days. The team plan is $100. The max plan, which is what serious daily users actually need, is $200 a month. One engineer tracked his usage over 8 months on Max. The bill came to around $800. At raw API rates, that same usage would have cost $15,000. So the subscription model is genuinely generous if you're using it at the scale it's designed for. But most developers aren't. Most developers have a mix of tasks, simple questions, quick fixes, one-off scripts, documentation, unit tests, opus-level reasoning, burned on tasks a calculator could handle. That's the gap Google walked into. Gemini CLI costs nothing. Every Google account gets 1,000 model requests per day. It's open source under Apache 2.0, meaning you can read the code, fork it, run it against different models if you want. Open source forks running alternative models already exist. The install takes 30 seconds. No waiting, no approval, no credit card. Before we get into performance, it's worth being precise about what we're comparing. Both tools are terminal agents, not IDE plugins, not chat interfaces. They run in your command line. You describe what you want in natural language. The agent reads your codebase, plans changes across multiple files, runs commands, interprets the output, and iterates. This is different from autocomplete. This is different from pasting code into a chat window. These agents understand repository context, the structure, the patterns, the relationships between files, and they act on it. The underlying models are different. Claude Code runs on Anthropic's Opus and Sonnet series. On the industry-standard benchmark for real-world software engineering tasks, not toy problems, Claude Code scores 80.9%. Gemini CLI runs on Google's latest Pro model by default. When you exhaust your daily Pro quota, it drops to Flash. Its scores on standard benchmarks sit measurably lower. That gap is real. The question is when it matters and when it doesn't. Here's what the data and developer experience actually shows. Context window. Gemini CLI's context window is 1 million tokens. To put that in concrete terms, that's roughly 3 to 4 million characters of code, enough to hold an entire mid-sized codebase in memory at once. For large-scale exploration, understanding how data flows through a system, mapping dependencies across a monorepo, getting oriented in an unfamiliar codebase, this is a genuine advantage. You don't have to curate what you feed it. You drop the codebase in and ask. Simple tasks: write a unit test, fix a type error, add a helper function, explain this module. These tasks fill 60 to 70% of a typical developer's day. On these tasks, the quality gap between the two tools largely disappears in practice. Gemini gets the logic right. The output is sometimes slightly more verbose, occasionally stylistically off, like it's generating from a template rather than reading the room, but it gets you there. For this category of work, there is no justification for the price difference. Price to performance for teams. One analysis found that Gemini CLI used more tokens per task than Claude Code, 432,000 input tokens versus 261,000 for the same operation. Less token efficient. But when the tokens are free, efficiency stops being the variable that matters. Multi-file refactoring is where the gap becomes impossible to ignore. Take a real scenario. A component that's grown too large needs to be split into smaller pieces. All import paths need updating. Types need to stay consistent across files. It's tedious, high stakes, the kind of work where a missed dependency creates a production bug that costs 3 hours to trace. Claude Code handles this category with a reliability that comes from a fundamentally higher baseline of codebase reasoning. It tracks dependencies. It understands existing patterns in a file before it writes new code. If your project uses a particular error handling convention, Claude tends to pick that up and mirror it. Gemini completes these tasks, but with more manual correction required on edge cases. A DataCamp comparison put it plainly. For single-file scripts and quick prototypes, both perform well. For large-scale refactors across 10 or more files, Claude Code is more reliable. That benchmark gap isn't an artifact. It's the difference between a tool that understands your codebase and a tool that generates plausible code in the direction of your codebase. Here's the pattern that's emerging among developers who've used both seriously. Not either or. Both as a stack. One question before every prompt. Does this task require understanding how multiple parts of my system interact, or is it a well-scoped operation on a known piece of code? That single question handles 90% of routing decisions. Clear scope, single file, exploratory work, large context. Gemini CLI, free tier, covers it. You don't need opus-level reasoning to rename a variable. Complex refactor, architectural decision, anything where a wrong answer compounds into a production problem. Claude Code. Gray zone. Start with Gemini. If the first pass misses, switch. You lose 2 or 3 minutes. You save a paid request on every task that turns out to be simple. One developer tracked this for a week. Gemini CLI handled about 65% of his daily work. He dropped from the $200 Max plan to the $20 Pro plan. Claude still handled the 35% that required it, but at a fifth of the previous cost. The tools don't conflict. They use separate authentication and separate processes. Running both simultaneously is straightforward. Before you install Gemini CLI today, 3 things worth knowing. 1. Data collection on the free tier. Gemini CLI's free tier opts you into input and output collection for model improvement. If you're working on proprietary code or client data, read the terms. Paid tiers remove this. It's a real consideration, not a fine print footnote. 2. Reliability under load. Free tiers get rate limited when demand spikes. Some developers report timeout loops during peak hours. For personal projects and exploration, this is an inconvenience. For production-critical workflows where downtime costs money, factor it in. 3. Model lock-in. Claude Code only works with Anthropic models. No option to bring your own. Gemini CLI is open source, already forked, already running against alternative models. If flexibility matters to your stack, that's a structural difference, not just a feature comparison. Here's the number that puts all of this in context. The JetBrains survey puts professional developer adoption at 74% and rising every month. The competitive pressure is real and accelerating. Claude went from 0 to number 1 in 8 months. Google responded with a free open-source alternative. OpenAI has Codex CLI. The tools are getting better and cheaper at the same time. For most developers right now, the move is simple. Install Gemini CLI today. It costs nothing, takes 30 seconds, and use it alongside whatever you're currently paying for. Track which tasks go where for 1 week. After a week, you'll have a personal decision framework better than any comparison article, including this one. The developers who will be ahead in 6 months aren't the ones who picked the right tool. They're the ones who stopped treating these as loyalty choices and started treating them as infrastructure.